It gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone to this media interaction with Foreign Secretary Mrs. Sujata Singh. An interaction like this would be significant on any day of the year, but it's especially meaningful today, March 8th, International Women's Day, a global day celebrating economic, political, and social achievements of women. It's a day where women are recognized for their contributions and their leadership. So such a meeting with Mrs. Singh, who's only the third woman to become India's Foreign Secretary in its 66-year-old history, is even more compelling. It's a known fact that countries with more gender equality have better economic growth, companies with more women leaders perform better, peace agreements that include women are more durable. Parliaments with more women enact more legislation on key social issues such as health, education, anti-discrimination, and child support. The evidence is clear. Equality for women actually means progress for all. This occasion also marks, for the first time, a collaboration between the Ministry of External Affairs, which has seen slowly the number of women increase in its rank and file, and the Indian Women's Press Corps. The idea was spearheaded by our colleague Shobna Jain a few months ago, has borne fruit in today's multi-focused program. Foreign Secretary, let me briefly introduce the Indian Women's Press Corps to you. It was set up in 1994 by 18 founder members, some of whom are with us today. Over the years, from that small beginning, it has grown by leaps and bounds. Today, we have nearly 600 members from the electronic, print, and online media, representing many languages and many diverse media organizations, making it a credible and established media collective, concerned at highlighting professional and gender issues. As part of our professional activities, we've had many eminent personalities interact with us. Presidents, prime ministers, first ladies, political leaders, and personalities from the cultural and activist world. The format of today's program will be as follows. Foreign Secretary Mrs. Sujata Singh will make a few opening remarks, and then we will throw the floor open to some questions. Members are requested to introduce themselves and keep their questions short as time is limited and we have many other events following. Thank you all for your cooperation.
Thank you very much for that introduction to the day's events. Let me start by wishing each and every one of you a happy International Women's Day. And when I say each and every one of you, I include our male colleagues sitting at the back. I think that this is something to be celebrated by everybody. And it is a day when every day perhaps, that's what one of the journalists said when I came in, every day is an International Women's Day or a Women's Day. But perhaps it's a day today when we just get together as women and perhaps reflect, perhaps talk, perhaps plan for the future, perhaps strategize, or just perhaps celebrate the fact that we are where we are today. So often, I think that the story of women is one of victimhood, of oppression, and of suffering. And there is that side too. And it is unfortunately a side that exists in large measure, even today. We have to recognize the fact that many of us are actually very privileged. We are not the norm. Every one of us here in this room today has made it through breaking out of a cycle, of breaking out of an environment which is not always conducive to women finding their own voice, finding their own roles, but we have done so. And there are many other women who will do so. And in this process, I think it is not just women who have helped each other, I think it is the men too. You have heard that behind every successful man there is a woman. And I believe that behind every successful woman there is a man and other women. Fathers, brothers, husbands, sons. I didn't have any formal remarks. I was actually just looking forward to interacting with you. But I must say that as professionals, wherever we are, I find that slowly but surely there are old girls' networks developing, which is our perhaps answer to old boys' networks, a sisterhood of women. And I find that in all the foreign offices where I've been to, you have women in, in very important key positions, and we understand each other. We interact with each other. And for several years now, in missions where I've been posted, the lady ambassadors used to get together. In Italy, we used to, all the female staff used to present each other with yellow mimosa, which is the flower that it marks Women's Day in some parts of Europe. And just get together and talk about issues. I think it's a useful asset. I think that this is something that we need to build on, to take further, and to use in the service of other women as well. And without overdrawing the fact, because ultimately each of us, whether we are a man or a woman, will be judged on our merits as individuals and in working lives as individuals who perform well. I think that if you make your mark as a professional who knows what she is talking about, then it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. I believe that the glass ceiling is increasingly being cracked, and we are here today to celebrate the glass ceiling that is being cracked by all of us here in this room, by the solar grandmamas, by our mothers who helped us, our sisters who helped us, and our daughters who will follow us. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
So we'll open the floor to questions, but just one remark. You know, there's this phrase of behind every man there's a woman, and I think now perhaps not behind, but at par and together, you know, equal. And let's kind of make this thing that we are at par with the men, and the men and women are, you know, at the same level. So with that thought, just opening up the floor to questions. Please introduce yourselves, and let's try and get as many questions as possible. Vichitra.
Hello, Sujata, Vichitra here. Hi. Okay, right at the outset, I want to first say that we were not aware that there's going to be a question-answer session. Nonetheless, there's a general perception in the last 1 year or so that India is being taken very lightly. We're seen as a soft power, and we seem to be giving up each time there's an aggressive stance from Pakistan. What is it? Is it the National Security Council, the Prime Minister's office, that is far more powerful than the Foreign Ministry now?
Hello, Vichitra. It's good to see you again. We were together in the same colony about 40 years back. So we go back a long way together. And yeah, you've asked a lot of questions, but let me focus on two, on Pakistan and on MEA. Okay, you know, all these things about soft power, you're not talking about women, right? You're talking about nations. And anybody who has seen the manner in which India has conducted itself on the world stage over the past several years, going back over a decade, will realize that India is anything but a soft power. There are harsh realities that have to be recognized. And when I say harsh realities, I do not mean the harsh realities in India. I mean the harsh realities across the border in Pakistan. I'm not going to go into any great detail. We all know what I'm talking about. We still have serious concerns about terrorism in Pakistan. We still have serious concerns about many incidents that have happened that seem to keep taking our efforts to normalize relations back. It's very easy to say that you should take hard measures in dealing with a country such as Pakistan. That's easier said than done. And I'm not going to go into strategic issues or into issues that talk about options that are just not feasible and that are just not on the table. I think we need to realize that we are dealing with Pakistan in the best manner that is possible given the circumstances, given the fact that we do not believe in responding to terrorism with terrorism. We are seen as a force for moderation. We are seen as a force for reason, for stability, and for good sense. That is a huge asset that we should never, ever fritter away. And let me also assure you, Vichitra, that on this, the whole of government is on the same page. It is only people who are irresponsible who talk about some of the issues that you have mentioned. And I would urge that people who analyze these issues just take a step back and look at the situation as it exists in every country in the world. There is a whole of government approach. And in every country, whether you have the State Department in the United States or the Foreign Office in the UK, or the Auswärtiges Amt in Germany, or the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia. And these are countries that, just few countries that I'm naming. The head of government will and can and does take the lead in certain issues. This is the way politics is. It's hard reality. And there is no way in which India is any different from any of these countries. We work together and we are on the same page.
Thank you. Madam Foreign Secretary, I'm Sushma Ramchandran. I wanted to shift the focus a little on women's issues. You are a woman foreign secretary. You're certainly not the first. There have been two before you. But in the rest of government, women have not risen to the same level through the civil services. If you see the cabinet secretary, if you see the home secretary, finance, defense, I don't think there have been any women at that level. Why is that though there are so many competent women in the civil services, they seem to come across a glass ceiling, at the very top? Yes, there are secretaries of women in child development. You'll always have women there. You'll have women in HRD, health. And surely, I think MEA has, broken the glass barrier. But in these strategic areas, home, finance, defense, cabinet, no women. Why is that?
I'd like to think that that is because the Foreign Service is India's premier civil service and leads the way in demonstrating to the world that Indian systems are fair and just as regards gender issues. But joking aside, and that was a joke, just in case you didn't get it, I think it's just a question of time. I think that, first of all, I understand that the intake of women into the All India civil services and the civil services in general are actually about 29 to 30%. And that's a little higher than it is for the foreign service. And it can be nobody's case that women continue to be discriminated against professionally in India. I know that you have raised 3 or 4 specific cases, but I believe it's just a question of time before women occupy these slots. I think that our fellow civil services are doing a great job. I interact with lady secretaries every day, and they are extremely competent. There's no question that they will rise to fill these spots. If not today, tomorrow.
Shobna, I've also been given notice to be quick. So, Shobna, Shanta, Kalyani. One.
हाय, मैं शोभना जैन हूँ मैम। मेरा फॉरेन ऑफिस में कवर करती हूँ, लेकिन ये सवाल थोड़ा सा अलग हटकर है। मैम, फॉरेन सर्विस में काफ़ी लेडीज़ हैं। आज जबकि हम लोग फॉरेन पॉलिसी को आम आदमी तक, पब्लिक तक पहुँचाने की बात काफ़ी ज़ोर शोर से कर रहे हैं, तो देखा ये गया है कि शहरों, मेट्रोस में तो लोग फॉरेन पॉलिसी में इंटरेस्ट लेते हैं, ख़ास तौर पे पुरुष वर्ग। लेकिन छोटे शहरों की महिलाएं, टाउन्स की महिलाएं, उनके लिए ये बड़ा अनएक्सप्लोर्ड सा एरिया है, वो कुछ जानती ही नहीं है। जबकि हम ये बात कर रहे हैं कि फॉरेन पॉलिसी को पब्लिक से सीधा जोड़ें, तो ऐसे में आपको लगता है कि कैसे हमें करना चाहिए कि हमारे ये मुद्दे उन तक पहुँचें, महिलाओं को भी लगे कि एक जो आसमान है वहाँ की महिलाएं जिसको वो छूना चाहें, वहाँ उड़ना चाहें। तो इसके बारे में हम चाहेंगे आप अपने व्यूज शेयर करें हमारे साथ। थैंक्स।
शोभना जी, मैं आपके सवाल को मैं अंग्रेज़ी में दूंगी क्योंकि मेरा हिंदी इतना अच्छा ठीक नहीं है। The point that you're making is perfectly valid, that we need to reach out to everybody. We need to go beyond the elite into drawing in people from all across the country into what foreign policy is about and into joining the service. That is increasingly happening. That's the interesting part. You know, just a few days back, I was speaking to an audience and about the foreign service of tomorrow. And I was comparing it with the foreign service that I joined in 1976. And in my time, we came predominantly from the metropolises, and we came predominantly from elitist backgrounds, let me put it that way. Now that is slowly but surely changing, and this is a very healthy change. Increasingly, our officer trainees, we don't call them probationers anymore, officer trainees, and the young girls, they're coming from the smaller towns and areas. And I have seen some of my officers who have come from villages, who have had to walk 5 miles to get to a school, cross flooded rivers by boat to get back. They are in the service. And recently I was in Naypyidaw for BIMSTEC, and it was a great pleasure to meet the first foreign service officer from Arunachal Pradesh, and a young lady also from there. You have the head of the regional passport office in Guwahati. I was there as well, and she is a young Naga lady officer. So it's happening, and the participation, yes, that they are coming increasingly from all parts of the country. And in terms of reaching out to people as such, yes, that was the part of your question that I haven't addressed. The participation of people, we are reaching out to the state governments, and through them we hope to reach to all parts of our country. On the 13th of March, next week, next Thursday, for the first time, we have invited the chief secretaries of all state governments and union territories to come to Delhi, and we are going to speak to them about Indian foreign policy and how we can work with them. Because, you know, if you look at the states that have borders with neighboring countries, huge number of states, they need to know what it's all about. We are working with the state governments, we are working with universities in all these states, we are working with think tanks, we are working with NGOs, and we hope through this way to also increase the catchment area of young people. And apart from that, our external publicity division and public diplomacy division, including in regional languages, we have an excellent web page. I'm sure you're all aware of it, and we keep updating it and trying to give people a sense as to what the Ministry of External Affairs does. So our apps, our mobile apps, is one of the most popular. It's been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times, and slowly but surely we are increasing our reach, and we will continue to do so, because the point that you have made is a very important one. We need to draw the larger audience, draw them all, because they're all stakeholders in the manner that we shape and implement foreign policy.
Shanta Sarvjit Singh, I am aware that over decades of travel, one has noticed that our missions abroad have progressed, but there's been a lot of quiche in their art and culture. And since this is my field, culture, policy, and art, my question is on that. I'm a member of a committee on Objet d'Art, which was set up by the Prime Minister. And over 2-3 years that I've been there, I've seen a lot of experts on this committee, on crafts and sculpture and contemporary art. I myself have addressed to you 2 different communications which have gone unanswered, because the problem that was brought to my notice was that every year, and this year, of course, we have no idea still, and it's March. So the Ides of March come, and then the committee is called and asked to push through the X amount of money to pick up whatever they can, because the budget has to be used in that particular time frame. Well, this year, even that, maybe you've been too busy, or maybe there are no funds left. I'm not aware of what the truth is. But I made an attempt to address this issue, which I think is important, that our missions abroad have some beautiful artworks which are carefully chosen by experts and which give a great picture of India.
Thank you, ma'am. I think that your observation is to the point. Now, the ODA committee has a very important role to play. It is appointed by the Prime Minister, and it undergoes change from time to time. I think the problem with previous ODA committees is that they were so large and unwieldy, but we found that many of the members didn't even turn up, which is why we couldn't even hold the meetings. So there has been some recent revamping. I think it might have dated to just before I joined. And after having joined, we have had meetings of the committee. We have taken on board the suggestions of very eminent members. And we have tried to introduce our missions and posts to the entire gamut of what is happening in India today on the art scene. We are looking at photographs, we are looking at sculpture, we are looking at representations of modern art forms. And, about the kitsch, well, very frankly, one man's kitsch is another man's art form. So I don't want to get into that. I believe that our missions are very well appointed. I believe that we have taken extra care, especially at the ambassador's level, to make sure that we display to the world the best of what India has to offer. And we'd be very glad to take your recommendations on board.
Hello. India is aspiring to be a permanent member at the Security Council. 2 years that it was a non-permanent member and it got elected with a unanimous vote. Its track record in Syria, Libya, Iran was not very complimentary to India's position. It took the stand that, these are internal issues. Whereas in the neighborhood, if we look at the immediate neighborhood, that stance contradicts what we have been saying at the Security Council. So what are your take on that? What is your take on that? Thank you.
You know, I didn't quite understand your question.
On Syria, on Libya, we did not take a stand. On Iran, we said this is an internal issue. Whereas when it comes to Sri Lanka, or when it comes to Bangladesh, or it comes to Pakistan, we don't say this is an internal issue. When it comes to Afghanistan, we don't say this is an internal issue. We take a stand. So that is the contradiction that I want to understand.
Well, first let me say that India always takes a stand. Even when we take the stand that it is an internal issue, it is a stand. And when it is an internal issue, in our assessment, it is an internal issue, we have absolutely no problems in saying that it is an internal issue. Now, your next question, how do you determine what is an internal issue? Okay? If you look at how people take their decisions relating to foreign policy, I think it's very interesting to note how it varies depending on how far the country about which the decision is being taken is to that particular country taking the decision. When we take decisions relating to the neighborhood, we take decisions based on consistent principles. We respect the sovereignty of nations. We respect their right to take their policies and to implement their policies according to their national decision-making processes. When we get into a mode of questioning something, it is when it affects our interests. If there is something happening within Pakistan that affects our citizens by way of terrorism-related activities or incidents on the line of control, then obviously it's not an internal issue, and we will say so.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Hema Ramakrishnan. I work with the Economic Times. Just to respond to Sushma, we've had a finance secretary who was a lady finance secretary. Sushma Nath was a finance secretary for a limited period, yes, but she was, yeah. Ma'am, I had two specific questions on, the US has raised concerns over the uncertainty on tax issues in India. Now, has there been any specific response from India about, say, retrospective taxation or the introduction of GAR, or there have been tax disputes under the mutual agreement procedures? Has there been any specific commitment or in the dialogue with the US? Is there anything that you have specifically committed to them? And the second issue is on the issue of patents. I mean, what has been your stand?
Thank you, Hema. Thank you especially for what I overlooked regarding the lady finance secretaries. So there you have your answer, right? Now, look, anything that relates to policy as of this date is on hold. You're aware of that. There is an election code of conduct that has kicked in. So there is no way that we can give a commitment on a policy issue to anybody. Having said that, let me say that in our interactions with the United States in the past few months, we have been in ongoing discussion, and we continue to engage with them in terms of what their anxieties are and telling them what our position is, as has already been defined earlier. So that in itself is useful, because we need to engage constantly to tell them what our stand is, especially on issues as important as intellectual property and tax issues, and to make sure that possible investors have their doubts clarified. And a lot of it is due to misinformation.
Ma'am,
Wind up quickly now, so I'm just
Naz
Naz and
Asghar.
Kalyani, and then we have to wind up.
I'm Naz Asghar from UNI. Ma'am, actually, I'm afraid I'm just diverting the issue a little bit from the women's problem, though the question is itself an offshoot of an incident relating to a woman. The US-India ties had come under strain following the Devyani Khobragade episode. And there are so many other issues like India's trade policies on which the US has expressed its concern and its dissatisfaction. I would like to know, where do India-US relationship stands today?
The India-US relationship is strong and will continue to grow from strength to strength. The US is one of India's most important strategic partners. We have always maintained that. You're right, the incident relating to our diplomat in New York caused a certain degree of misunderstanding for a certain period of time. And we are discussing the issues of privileges and immunities quite separately. We have insulated that from the rest of our relationship. You're aware that the Energy Secretary is coming next week. You're aware that there are several other dialogues that are in process and are continuing.
Kalyani, and that's the last question.
Yeah, my question is also about two women chief ministers, and also in a broader way the foreign ministry itself. Do you think the role of foreign ministry is being sidelined more and more because of the coalition politics today? You might have noticed that Jayalalitha and Mamata Banerjee, they both have a say in how you deal with either Bangladesh or with Sri Lanka. I'm sure you had been to Sri Lanka recently also. Now again we are having the third time the UN resolution. So do you think that there should be a kind of foreign ministry cell in each of the states which can coordinate with the leaders as well as the administration, so that while you are going ahead with the finalization of the policy, their views will be taken into account, and it's possible? Thank you.
Well, you know, I think one of the first questions we had a discussion on the role of MEA, right? Now, look, foreign policy is a sum of many parts in every country in the world. And let me go back to how foreign policy is conducted in other countries. Domestic politics play a very important role. After all, foreign policy is all about protecting domestic interests. You have to interact with your domestic constituencies, whether they are the media, whether they are state governments, whether they are universities, think tanks, other ministries of Government of India. But having done all that, and it is legitimate, let me just say that everyone has a right to have a view on how foreign policy should be conducted. After that, It is the role of the Ministry of External Affairs to take all points of view into consideration and see what is in India's best interests. And that is what we do. On every issue where all the stakeholders have a stake, you have to find a balance. And I do not see it as MEA being sidelined, truly. I think that the more MEA opens up and the more MEA interacts and reaches out to people, after all, if we have to do something with Bangladesh, it has to be with the cooperation and the participation, not just of West Bengal, but of Assam and Tripura. So we have to take them on board. So that's all right. That's the way every diplomat operates. And we welcome their participation, and we're also confident in the fact that the government of India, when it finally takes a decision relating to a particular issue, will do it in the best national interest.
Is there a need for any cell in each of the states?
That's a long-standing question. We don't have the people to even staff headquarters and missions and posts overseas, so I'm not sure where we're going to get the bodies. But, I'll tell you that we are looking at how we can use our regional passport offices and our ICCR offices. We have about 20, 30, 40 such offices in the state governments doing different types of activities, whether they're helping our ITEC, our Technical and Economic Cooperation Program students in these various states, or giving passport services or other services. We are trying to see how we can use them better to interact with state governments in terms of assisting state governments in their investment or trade promotion delegations that they mount overseas. And state governments, we are in touch with them every day on these issues. The Joint Secretary looking after Sri Lanka and Maldives is in touch with her counterparts in the Tamil Nadu state government to talk about the fishermen's issues. So even though there is no cell in the state governments, the Ministry of External Affairs is here and is always available to talk to any of the state governments on any of the issues that they wish to talk to us about.
And this is a good point to end this media interaction on a forward-looking note, which leaves me just to ask Aruna Singh, our General Secretary, to deliver a vote of thanks.
आज मैं हिंदी में बोलूँगी, मुझे उम्मीद है आपको समझ आ जाएगी। आज बहुत ही सुखद माहौल है और अवसर है कि हम अंतर्राष्ट्रीय महिला दिवस के अवसर पर एक महिला विदेश सचिव के साथ अपने एक्सपीरियंसेस और बातचीत कर रहे हैं। और मैं इस उम्मीद के साथ अपनी बात ख़त्म करूँगी कि जल्दी ही इस देश में महिला कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरी भी बने, तब हम इससे भी ज़्यादा जोश शोर से आएंगे और इसको सेलिब्रेट करेंगे। और बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, कई जगहों पे अभी भी मिनिस्ट्री में सेक्रेटरी हैं और सुजाता जी ने जिस तरह से विदेश मंत्रालय का एकदम अच्छे से फॉरेन पॉलिसीज़ पे काम किया है, कर रही हैं और हैंडल कर रही हैं, तो हम दिखा रहे हैं कि विमेन पावर एक स्ट्रॉन्ग होल्ड कर सकती है, उसको रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी दी जाए। और थैंक्स IWPC की ओर से थैंक्स करने का जिम्मा वैसे शोभना जैन का होना चाहिए था। मैं तो बेवजह जनरल सेक्रेटरी की हैसियत से बैठ गई यहाँ, शोभना जैन ने सारे एफर्ट्स किए थे और मनिका ने। मैं शोभना जैन का थैंक्स करती हूँ, अपने सब सीनियर्स मेंबर्स और फॉरेन एक्सटर्नल अफेयर मिनिस्ट्री का, जिन लोगों ने हमें इस अवसर पर बुलाकर हम लोगों को एक मौका दिया अपनी बात कहने का और फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी के साथ कुछ एक्सपीरियंसेस शेयर करने। थैंक्स अ लॉट्स मैम, थैंक यू मैम। IWPC की ओर से आपका थैंक यू।
I also want to extend our thanks for the lovely books that you're contributing to our library, which I know JP has been kind of responsible for this, but we have had a contribution to our library is welcome.
Thank you. Before we end, I just wanted to make one particular announcement. And for this, I'm indebted to my fellow secretary, Sujata Mehta. You know, of the 4 secretaries we have in the Ministry of External Affairs, 2 are women, and both are named Sujata. Sujata Mehta, Sujata Singh. And we thought today, in honor of International Women's Day, we would rename this hall, rechristen it. It's called the Multipurpose Hall. We are going to call it the C.B. Muthamma Hall. In honor of, yes. Well, she was the first woman Foreign Service officer who stayed on in the service. There were 2 others who joined but had to resign because the rules in those days demanded that when you got married, you resigned. Yeah. So she actually went to court, and the Supreme Court, in its judgment of September 1979 in C.B. Muthamma versus the Union of India, noted that discrimination against women in traumatic transparency is found in this rule. That was the rule that she was agitating against. The misogynist posture is a hangover of the masculine culture of manacling the weaker sex, forgetting how our struggle for national freedom was also a battle against women's thraldom. Freedom is indivisible, so is justice. This rule, which was in defiance of Article 14 and Article 16 of the Indian Constitution, was removed on November 12, 1973. In the landmark judgment, Justice V. R. Krishna Iyer and Justice P. N. Sani noted that since justice has been done, there is no further probe due, and the need to overhaul all service rules to remove the stain of sex discrimination without waiting for ad hoc inspiration from writ petition or gender charity. So we have moved from gender charity to gender parity, and all of us who are here as secretaries owe a lot to Ms. C.B. Muthamma. Thank you.
That I think even goes without saying in a way because it's so close to you, but we want to extend a warm invitation to IWPC to come and actually be part of our network, you know, and not on, I mean, formally and informally to interact with our members so that we can take this thought ahead of being a resource center for, you know, the media and for the bureaucracy and making it a hub of intellectual thought, perhaps. For all members, I'm including the male members of the Foreign Service as well.